Well, a lot happening this week. We'll be keeping an eye on the developments around that issue. In studio now, we're discussing My Dress, My Choice, hashtag My Dress, My Choice on Twitter. Share your views on Facebook as well. On SMS, it's 22422. We're happy to have Priscilla Nyokabi with us, the Nyeri County Women's Representative. Priscilla, let's start with the law on this issue. We are stripping them because they're indecently dressed, say some of the mainly young men who are doing this. What does the law say?
The law gives women the right to dignity, protects them against violence, Articles 28, 29 of the Constitution, and violence from whichever sources, be it private sources or public sources, and even protects us from cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment. So there's a flouting of law with all this conduct that's going on. There's
been some suggestion that if the women don't complain, nothing can be done. Is this true legally?
I think that the Sexual Offences Act does allow other people to complain on behalf of the women who are stripped, but ideally every person who is affected should then complain to the police. But I think as we go on, we need to look at the law around these indecent exposure problems and what the men are insisting is the right standard of dress. I think there's a problem now with that whole setup, and it's the usual problem of a country that is moving from traditional systems to modern systems. If we're moving to modern systems, then we have to embrace modernity. If we're having laptops and iPads, I mean, a lot of these things come with modernity.
Now, it's interesting that you bring that up, and let's go into this issue a little bit deeper. And it has to be said that it's not a men and women issue. There are very many men saying women should not be stripped.
That's right.
And there are many women saying women should dress more decently. We'll be sharing more of your views in just a moment. So I don't think there's a gender divide on this issue. There are very different perspectives. Also, places I've been in, you've been in modern society in the Western world where decency is a big thing, where you can't walk in hot pants. And I just want to use a little example. Here at Citizen, we had an artist visiting us, a gospel artist, a young man, and he had sagging pants. It's not a women's issue alone. I remember saying to him, take it as if I'm your mother, don't feel offended, and I pulled his pants up. Also, playing with my children at an event. A lady was there, a mother with a child in an extremely short dress. It was embarrassing. Then she bent over. It was game over. We saw absolutely everything. I was humiliated sitting with my children and didn't know how to explain to them when they looked at me and said, "Mummy, why is she dressed like that?" So when it comes to decency, how do we define it? How do we set rules and regulations for what is appropriate, what is not appropriate? And when we say tolerance, how do we ensure we're also respecting the rights of those who don't want to see your body displayed?
I think it's a tight balance of law, but it can be achieved. Even when you are offended by somebody's sense of dress, your answer is not to undress them, because then that doesn't help the situation. I think the answer is either to complain to police. The answer is to bear it as well, because there are also things you do that other people don't like. We can't just have a black and white rule that if ladies put on short skirts, that the touts and the men on the stage have a right to undress them. But it's going to be a tight balance for us, because I also come from a fairly conservative county. They would prefer that you don't put on short clothes. And so you have to be realistic to that. So again, also for the women, because our society is still modernizing, then it pays to really just be within some acceptable norms, unless you're in your own home or unless you're in your own bedroom. But that is not to say that the people who see it have a right to undress you. They don't have that right. Nobody at all should ever take law into their own hands.
In fact, if anything, and somebody had mentioned that actually on Twitter, if anything, you cover them up. So young men, if you feel offended, how about taking a lesso or a kikoi and offering it to the lady and saying, just cover, it will humiliate her enough to not do it again, or to think twice about where are you addressing appropriately for the particular area. If there are gaps in the law right now, what would you suggest they are, and how do we address them?
I think we're going to need a law on the indecency, and we're going to need a law that makes sure that those who do it then get apprehended and get punished for the conduct. Because it seems like the people, the touts, think that it is right to do it. We've looked at the statistics from Malindi to Mombasa to Nyeri, my own county. In fact, in my own county, the girl who was stripped was admitted in hospital as a result of the shock that she suffered from that act.
So she was traumatized.
She was traumatized by it. So Nairobi now, I think that when we go back to Parliament, and the Kenya Women Parliamentary Association is going to address this matter tomorrow. I chair the Caucus 47. We're going to look at what's going on and where there are gaps in law and just clarity as to this matter. One, that it is indeed good to dress decently, but two, even if you don't feel that the person is dressed decently, you don't have a right to act. Remember, the Constitution gives all of us rights, allows everybody to have space, and really that tolerance comes back to our country. You may not like what I wear, but my family and other friends could, softly, like what you're saying, you saw with the parent in the school. I think the teachers are going to say, the mother of so-and-so, it would be good if you put on, there are ways society corrects itself, but not in the manner that we are seeing with the touts.
No stripping. Somebody says here on Twitter, sharing some of your views coming in, no one should dictate what other people wear. Freedom of choice is important. That's MP Dafrau sharing his views there. And somebody else says, decency must prevail at all times. Let our ladies dress properly, good morals. And that's Dishega in Nakuru. Continue to share your views with us. When Uganda actually acted on this and set up what were regarded as very strict laws on dressing, it was interesting to see the uproar that followed, but also some of the support that followed. What does this say about our societies?
I think the societies are refusing to move along with the modernity, because culture is not static. Culture is dynamic. At some point in time, it will be fine for people to wear short clothes, including in our own country. It happens in other cultures as well. But then we are not there yet. And so that is why there's resistance in our own systems and in our own sort of African countries. But with time, I think the way culture is modernizing and culture is not static, I think we're going to see a lot of changes. I mean, already there's a lot of change with new things that have come into our jurisdiction. But what I personally would advocate for, because I also would love to see people decently dressed, is let us have their fine line well defined. I don't think it pays to see somebody's private parts. I don't think that that's a good thing either in our country or in whichever culture. But the point is about, for me, the number of police that we have in downtown. I think that the police commissioner has got to see what's going on with this, the Ministry of Interior. I think we probably need more police officers beyond the ratio that we have now in the country. I think we need maybe 1 to 400 citizens police ratio in our urban centers, and especially downtown. And then we have to look at the penal code afresh. I think that the touts need new laws, codes of conduct, codes of ethics, because they are not supposed to be enforcing the law. They are supposed to be on the stages to help us go back home or to help us travel.
It's going to be interesting to find out if there's more going on with the touts. Is this a way to take back power for young men who perhaps feel a little bit disempowered and hopeless? And more discussion on this is going to take place tomorrow on Monday special with a series of experts. You need to stay with us for that. But we'll be going through some more of your views. I want to shift gears slightly. I'm going to ask you to give a final word to young men and women watching, particularly young ones, on presentation and dressing. What would you leave them with? What lessons perhaps? But before I do that, as a woman in leadership, a woman representative for Nyeri, there's been a lot of talk about what have women achieved so far with these particular positions. What would you say?
I think we're just about to finish the law on domestic violence. Remember, what we're discussing now is part of a wider debate on gender-based violence. So we already have sufficient number of laws now on domestic violence with the sexual offences that was passed earlier, but the private sphere, domestic violence, was still not covered. So in Parliament now, we have in second reading the protection against domestic violence, and that's going to be useful to protect violence in homes. But then I think more laws still need to be passed. The 2/3 gender law, we still need more women in Parliament, and so we are looking at those issues. And more importantly, issues of empowerment. Again, if you see issues like what we are seeing with our bus stops and all, it means that the people who were there didn't have a job. The people who were there weren't gainfully employed. Otherwise, if they were gainfully employed, then this is not the sort of conduct that they would be engaged in. So a lot more empowerment, a lot more funding going into affirmative action groups. So those are the issues we're dealing with right now.
How do we say, what path do we walk on to ensure that one day we don't need affirmative action, but that women are elected into positions by the electorate?
Oh, they are not there in America yet, so I think it will take us a little bit longer. It's a long time coming. But in the next election, I think we'll see how far the number of women in leadership now, including in cabinet, is going to improve the situation. And we are asking a lot of the political parties and political leaders to allow women to exercise leadership. And so I think the next election is going to be better, but it's an incremental journey. It may take us longer to get to the 50-50 balance, but we're hoping that one day we're going to get there.
Finally, Priscilla, if you could share with the young people watching, if you had a daughter or a son.
And I do have a daughter.
You do have it. There you go. You had to share your words of wisdom with them. How do you present yourself? How do you dress? because they're the rights we fight for, they're also the wisdoms that we share. What would you say?
I would say, one, it is good to express yourself through dress. It is protected in the Constitution. And two, it is good to be decent. And three, that it pays also to pay attention to the environment where you're going to be on. But for the young men, you are not moral police. You are not moral policemen. Nobody is a moral policeman in this country. You have no right to undress anybody. You could complain, you could put it on social media, you could say other things, but you can never, ever, ever as a man exercise your physical nature on a woman. It is just plain wrong. I think our country has got to reject violence against women in all its forms, be it at home, be it in the public sphere.
Thank you so much for making time, Priscilla. What are your thoughts? Continue to share them with us. Hashtag My Dress, My Choice. As I said, this topic continues tomorrow into Monday's special. More on this. So keep it going with your thoughts, your wisdoms, your insights as well. The SMS number 22422, or share your views on Twitter and Facebook. Stay with Sunday Live.
Thank you.
I think he managed to tap.